Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my bariatric journey. I'm Miranda. If you've never been here before, we cook on this channel. What I'm doing today is, well, what I've been talking about for the past few weeks is comfort foods. So comfort foods and sweets has been my main focus because I know that's a thing a lot of us people who have had bariatric surgery miss, is the comfort foods and sweets. As you might be able to tell, I'm not losing as much weight as I want to be losing, probably because I'm not always sticking where I should be sticking. So I try to make these recipes to the specifications of the bariatric clinic that I go to. I went to Guelph. If you went to a different bariatric clinic, you might have different specifications, but I try to stick to the specifications that my clinic says to stick to. That way I can share the recipes with you guys, and we can always weight together on our journeys or maintain our weights, and, you know, do what we need to do to get out of that scary, morbid obesity place that I've been in most of my life. So with that said, I've actually as I said, been talking about comfort foods recently. And one of the big comfort foods, I actually had a couple of people, but a really good friend of my husband's actually mentioned to me scalloped potatoes. With Easter coming up, at the time of this taping, it's next weekend. But with Easter coming up, I wanted to do scalloped potatoes. And I know scalloped potatoes and ham is a big thing. Potatoes is just one big starch, so it's kind of hard to get your protein and all your other things in with your scalloped potatoes. So trying to make a bariatric friendly recipe for this. And my husband actually, also known as my production crew, looked online and he found a really good recipe at lexiscleankitchen.com. And this is for Lexi's scalloped potatoes. I've changed it a little bit. I've taken out things like butter and replaced it with the non-fat cooking spray that I prefer. And instead of arrowroot powder, I'm actually just going to use skim milk powder directly in my skim milk. And because I've noticed that when you add the skim milk powder, it does thicken the milk when you add it directly to milk itself. So because there's a lot of cheese in this recipe, and again, I'm using a low-fat version of cheddar cheese. So this is actually Armstrong light cheddar cheese, which is how I calculated the fat, all the calorie counts and everything in the nutrition sheet that I always put with my recipes. I calculated this with the Armstrong light cheddar cheese. So it's old style light cheddar cheese. So yeah, so for my thickening, I'm just gonna let the cheese thicken it with the skim milk powder. And I'm hoping that's going to thicken it enough to make it a nice, creamy, but still low fat, high protein version of scalloped potatoes. Still pretty cheesy. It uses 2 whole cups of the cheese, and that should make enough for 8 servings, 8 bariatric size servings, which is less than a cup of the total. There's also quite a few spices in it. So doing garlic powder, onion powder, thyme, paprika, salt, and pepper, again, helps with the flavor because there is a lot less of the extras like the butter that gives it a lot of a rich flavor, and the whole milk or cream that you would normally add, which obviously as bariatric patients, we're not going to add that. And I'm hoping that it'll taste just as good, if not better, than any scalloped potatoes you ever had. I've already started. My oven is on 400 degrees. It's preheating right now to 400. And I'm actually going to start by getting my onions ready. So I'm just going to put my onions, sweat them out for 3 to 5 minutes in a pan to get them nice and translucent. And then as soon as they're nice and translucent, I'm going to come back here to mix up the rest of the recipe. So all I'm doing right now is putting these in a pan over medium-high heat and just sauteing them until they're translucent. And I'm only using my low-fat cooking spray for this. Okay, I made a vital mistake the first time I made this. So voiceover part is just me correcting that mistake. So what I'm doing here is I'm putting everything into a bowl. So I have my 2 cups of skim milk and half a cup of skim milk powder. This is just to add extra protein to the recipe. I was also hoping it would make the milk mixture a little bit thicker. It didn't make it any thicker. The milk mixture was actually very watery. You'll see at the end of the video that it was very watery when it came out of the oven. So to correct this, I'm going to suggest now that as you're adding the milk mixture, you're putting the milk and the skim milk in the bowl, you have another bowl with approximately 2 tablespoons of water and 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. Mix that together in the smaller bowl and add it to the milk mixture. And then we're going to add our seasonings to the entire mixture. So we have half a teaspoon of salt. And then about a 1/4 teaspoon of cracked black pepper, or to taste, whatever you prefer pepper-wise. Half a teaspoon of garlic powder. Half a teaspoon of paprika. Half a teaspoon of thyme. Half a teaspoon of onion powder. And I didn't think I saw enough black pepper in this, so I just added a bit more. Okay, now at this point, you're going to see me add the cheese and the onions after I've mixed all this together. At this point, instead of adding the cheese and the onions to this, I would suggest taking it back to the pan over the stove, adding the cheese. Hold aside about half a cup of the cheese for putting on top, and then add the rest of the cheese to the mixture and add the entire mixture to the pot on the stove that you had cooked your onions in, and cook it until the cheese is fully combined and is thickened between 3 and 5 minutes. That's going to give you a nice thicker sauce, because at this point I add the onions in here and the sauce is cold and it isn't given a chance to thicken. And that is why my sauce turned out very watery in the end. So I'm just making a suggestion here that instead you add the thickening agent of the cornstarch mixed with water and cook it on the stove for 3 to 5 minutes to thicken it, as opposed to what you see me doing, which was all wrong. It wasn't bad tasting. It tasted very good. It just didn't turn out as thick and creamy as I wanted it to. So that's my... In her recipe, she added the potatoes at this point, but she had also done hers as a roux on the stove. So she had it like the arrowroot powder was warm and then the milk and the cheese all went in when it was warm, and it made it a thick roux, which isn't the exact same as what I'm doing. But I'm still going to add them now because this allows me to separate them each and make sure each of them gets some of the creamy mixture on them. I'm just going to grab my spatula back here, because that's going to allow me to make sure that that creamy mixture is getting in and on every single potato. Now I have 6 Yukon Gold potatoes. Actually, no, I think these were russets. The bag actually just says all-purpose potato. I assume all-purpose potatoes are russets. I've always just assumed that's what they are. So, but the original recipe called for Yukon Gold potatoes. I'm using all-purpose potatoes, and I've cut them up. You see the brownness on them. That's not that they're dirty or anything. They've been cleaned. We cut them up. My husband actually cut them up for me a little before I started taping, so the brown is just oxidization from the air. That happens, same thing that happens to apples when you cut into them. You cut into an apple and don't use it right away, it starts to go brown. That's kind of the same thing. So I'm just making sure they all get separated into this mixture so that none of them will be stuck together, hopefully, when I put them in my pan. Now I have prepared a 9 by 13 pan for this. And I've sprayed a 2-second spray of the fat-free cooking spray. So the cooking spray I use is a no-name brand one that I got at the local No Frills. But it's a fat-free olive oil type spray. And I used a 1-second spray to saute the onion and a 2-second spray to prepare my baking dish. So altogether, that's 3 seconds of spray. That's how you kind of calculate the calories in how much spray you're using, is by counting how many seconds you've done it for. So as you can see, all the potatoes are kind of separated in here now. It's still a very not thick mixture yet though. It is definitely going to thicken up in the oven as the cheese melts. So I'm not too worried about it. Okay, so we're just going to put it in here. Everything in there and spread it around nice and neatly. As nicely as you can get it to look. I mean, if you wanted to lay them in here one piece of potato at a time, the way my mom and my grandma used to, that is totally up to you. I am not that meticulous of a cook myself, so I'm not going to do that. It'll just taste just as good whether I layer them in one at a time or not. There we go. Just make sure I got everything out of that bowl into here. Now I kind of want to push the potatoes down so that they're all at least partially submerged, hopefully fully submerged by the liquid. So that milk mixture. All right, and now on top of that, I'm going to take that about half a cup of cheese that I set aside for the top, and I'm going to put that on top. All right, now don't forget that on my blog post, which I post to down below, you're going to get all the links that I used to get this recipe, plus the entire recipe, plus any nutrition information, and everything will be on my blog post. So don't forget to go to my blog post. Also, I'm still looking for more comfort food recipes, still looking for more sweets recipes. If you have any good sweets recipes or comfort food recipes, please link them down below. Let me know what you want to see. Maybe there's a specific food that you want me to try and find a recipe for. I'm more than happy to look for it, as I did with the scalloped potatoes. So I'm going to go ahead and put these scalloped potatoes in the oven. They take, it says 55 minutes to cook, just like this. It doesn't say to cover them or anything. So I'm just going to cook them just like this for 55 minutes at 400 degrees. It does say broil for the last 2 minutes to get that bubbly brown look on the top. So we'll do that as well. So 55 minutes and then 2 minutes, the last 2 minutes of that with the broiler of your oven on. All right, so we'll see you guys in about an hour and we'll see how this turned out.
1 hour later.
All right, we're back. So what we did is we left it in the oven for 55 minutes, and when we went to put it under the broiler, we noticed that it looks beautiful just the way it is. I don't really think it needs that broiling time, at least not for me today. Looks gorgeous. All the cheese has nicely browned and bubbled, so that's really good. I'm really excited to try this. This is meant as a side dish besides something hopefully healthy. My husband is making broccoli and ham to go with ours, so I'm not going to have very much of the ham, but I will have some broccoli. So your amount of this is actually going to be less than a cup. So just remember that you want a cup total of food on your plate. When after your bariatric surgery, you don't ever want more than a cup of food at one sitting. That's not to say that you can't have it a second time. So if you have some now and then in 3 to 4 hours, you have a bit more of it, that's perfectly fine. Just remember that that's what you're wanting to do. And so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to kind of divide this into 8. I need actually a little knife to do the dividing part, I think. Let me just grab something here. So this is going to allow me to divide it up. So that's half. That's in quarters. And then we'll just do the half of that will be 8ths. Okay, it does look a little bit watery. We have actually let this sit for about 5 minutes out of the oven. So after it went to the oven, we've taken it out and I've let it sit on the counter for about 5 minutes. And it still looks a little bit watery, but I'm not too worried because when I put the knife through, the potatoes seem cooked all the way through and there's still lots of cheese everywhere. So I think it's just extra water that's kind of coming out. So we'll see how that goes. Okay. Grab my potato-y bits. All right, set this aside. And there it is. So there is my scalloped potatoes. Now you did see there was a little bit of water in the pan, and that does have to do a lot with the fact that we use skim milk powder and no thickeners in this. Because again, I didn't want to add any extra calories or fats or anything like that. So we're still, looks like it's going to taste delicious. So I'm gonna make sure I get some of this cheese sauce and some potato, and we'll go ahead and try it and see what it tastes like. Smells good. Really smell that thyme. Mmm, very cheesy. Yeah, very, very cheesy. Definitely a thumbs up for me. It's not as creamy as your standard scalloped potatoes, and I do apologize to anyone out there who wanted super screamy, excuse me, super creamy scalloped potatoes. This is not that recipe. I tried to alter it enough that we could get it to be more bariatric friendly, and I believe we've done that. It does have all of the protein in it that we need with the extra skim milk powder, the milk, the cheese. We used everything low fat or fat free to avoid all the fats in there. Didn't use any butters and no extra starches. My dog is literally sitting right here staring at the table wanting to eat this. So yeah, anyway, that's it. That's the scalloped potato recipe. I hope you enjoyed it. I would possibly recommend, if you can, and I'll put second nutrition down below, add a couple tablespoons of flour to the milk mixture and maybe cook it for a couple of minutes to make it thicker before putting it in. I think if I were to try this recipe again, I might try that. So I will definitely put what the extra 2 tablespoons of flour would be to this recipe. I will put that in the nutrition information as well, just as an option that you can do that. But this is definitely perfect for what I need it for. And I'm really, really actually happy with this recipe. I love how it turned out. It's very cheesy, cheese on every layer. Every potato is covered in the sauce. So it definitely worked out quite well. And again, remember, comment below with all your comments. If you try this recipe, tag me on Instagram. I would love to see your recipes. I would love to see you try some of the recipes that I've tried, and tell me your favorite comfort foods, and we'll make a comfort food with your favorite recipe or possibly sweets recipe. And I definitely wanted to mention my absolute favorite YouTuber at the moment. I have many, many favorites, but my absolute favorite one at the moment is Chef John from foodwishes.com. I love him, and he just did an almond flour version of baked chocolate donuts that look so good. So I'm hoping to try that in a recipe soon, but definitely check out his recipe for that because they just look delicious. And thanks again for joining me this evening. I'll see you later. Have a great night.